Today on CityCast Chicago, I'm not sure if y'all saw the video of that near miss at Midway a couple of weeks ago. Well, ever since, plenty of my friends and family have asked, is it safe to fly in and out of Chicago, which notably is one of the busiest cities in the world for airport travel. But to make matters scarier, this hasn't been the only worrying aviation story we've read lately. We all remember those crashes in DC and Philly earlier this year. So we thought it was important to sit down with an expert to find out if there's really something going on here or if it's just a lot of scary headlines. It's Monday, March 10th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago is talking about. Dr. Joe Sweeterman is an aviation expert and the director of the Chaddock Institute at DePaul University. Give it to me straight, sir. According to a recent poll, the public's confidence in flying has apparently dipped since the January disaster in DC. Are these concerns justified, or is this more of a media saturation thing that doesn't really reflect how safe air travel is overall?
You know, those concerns really are out there. And I hear it all the time, talking to people, they bring it up, and I'm flying, is it safe, and so forth. And so far it appears, we can have two different forces happening. The pandemic, of course, is long over, but people are excited to be back flying. Travel is booming, particularly international. And then these accidents occur. We've had 3 commercial accidents and some private jets as well. So when you look at the statistics, and we just had an incredible run of this country of no fatalities on commercial flights, and you really look at Western Europe, the U.S., and the Asia Pacific, it's just incredible the statistics we're seeing now, like 0.5 accidents per million flights. I mean, so it's just remarkable how when the accidents occur, they're just front page stories for weeks because it's been so long since we've had the accidents. So the air travel system is still safe. And I don't think there's any doubt about that. I will say, though, that air travel is growing so fast that just the number of opportunities for accidents goes up just because there's more planes in the sky. Plus, we're getting so risk averse that we just see any accidents as being unacceptable. So it is a bit of a crisis in air travel. We have to figure out why these things are happening, even if the numbers show air travel is still safe.
Mm-hmm. You are also the author of Terminal Town, which gives a history of Chicago's airports, bus depots, and train stations. When we think about some of the specifics of our airports, let's talk about Midway. I know it has shorter runways than other airports. Again, we were talking earlier not only about the DC crash, but the near miss at Midway. I've seen the video of the Southwest flight dipping down to land and then pulling back up. Can you kind of remind people what actually happened at Midway a couple of weeks ago, and how safe is it to fly in and out of the airport?
Oh, yeah. And, Midway has been called the busiest square mile in aviation. You look at a map and it's like this perfect square almost. And that's just exciting place to be because you got airplanes everywhere and crowds, and Southwest hub is flourishing there, and the terminal's been expanded. And you almost can't get many more flights in there with being almost at saturation now. And, the length of the runways are short enough. You can't fly wide bodies in there. So there's been a lot of work done to keep Midway safe. One thing that was put in, there was an accident on Southwest back around 2005 or so.
Southwest Airlines Flight 1248, when it attempted to land, the plane slid off the runway, smashed through a barrier, and ended up on Central Avenue, 55th Street. The jetliner struck 2 vehicles with 9 people in them. A 6-year-old boy riding in one of the vehicles was killed.
I see the crash.
And they put in these material arrestor devices where if a plane overruns the runway, it sort of runs into kind of this gravel, asphalt, loose material that stops it much quicker than if it just skids on a runway. And so they put that in, just to give another element of safety if a plane has to abort and can't stop. And it's been really pretty a nice success story since then. There hasn't been any really close calls or so forth. So when the accident near miss happened a few weeks ago, it just shocked us because, how did that general aviation plane get in the wrong spot? And, we don't yet know what the Transportation Safety Board is going to find there. It does appear that there's some human error involved. And it raises this larger question, which is whether you really should have these private planes floating around these busy airports. And, that's something I think is going to get a close look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the plane on the ground was a part of FlexJet, which I think is like a on-demand private jet service. Am I correct?
That is right. And that's a booming business right now with people a little tired of going commercial. And so we're seeing almost like a Uber share arrangement where you can share aircraft with others or have it so many hours a year. And you go to places called fixed-based operations, a little terminal at Midway where you can bypass the big terminal and get on your jet, at only a few steps walk.
Mm-hmm. Now, PJ has entered the cultural lexicon, I feel like more and more and more over the last, not just decade, but definitely the last couple of years, especially as people are tracking celebrity private jets. I feel like that's grown as a online activity. So that's Midway. What about O'Hare?
Yeah, so the fascinating story in our city, Midway, we kind of wrote it off as dead in the mid-'60s, and it's come back in a big way. Partly because O'Hare was so successful. And we started running out of room at our bigger airport, which, was a brand new airport with the first flights in 55. So all the activity from Midway shifted to O'Hare. And O'Hare was designed, as at the time, pretty cutting edge. And we had terminals with the 2-level designs with arrivals and departures on different levels. And that's kind of set a new standard for the country. And gradually, the rest of the world caught up and surpassed us. And what we're left with were these crossing runways at O'Hare. And it was a terrible accident in 72 where a North Central jet and Delta had an accident there at one of the crossing points. And so it was a real effort to try to untangle those runways so that you didn't have the crossing patterns, which, doesn't work safely as well as parallel runways. And boy, that was a struggle. I mean, Mayor Daley pushed, Richard M. Daley had to condemn land in Bensonville, and there were lawsuits, and everybody's upset about, the taking of property. But at the end of the day, we're left with an airport with, essentially 6 parallel runways. So we've overcome that problem of these airplanes crossing. But, it's not just about runways that can cause accidents. It's air traffic control and all kind of other things. So we've had a pretty good run at O'Hare. The last terrible accident was in mid-'70s when American Airlines DC-10 went down. And that was the legacy of that was just terrible. And unfortunately, we've avoided, anything calamitous out there like we saw in Reagan Airport.
I mean, after the disaster in D.C. and a few other incidents, are you expecting any changes in regulations or protocols?
Well, I'm nervous about that in the sense, nervous for the airlines, but probably good for safety, is that usually when we see an accident like that occurring on January 29th at Reagan with a collision, something went wrong in the protocol. And I think the good news here for the airlines and flyers, it doesn't appear to be a mechanical problem or a system problem on the airplane. So I don't think we're going to see the FAA ground regional jets or 737s or whatever, like we saw during the Boeing MAX problem, and that causes chaos for flyers. I think, though, they will have perhaps reduced landing frequency on some of the busy runways around the country we could see. And that could ripple through the industry if they say instead of this many flights per hour, you get 90, 80% of that. And that could, cause lots of delays and so forth. So I do expect some FAA follow-up. We'll just see how severe it is.
A Slice of Life is coming to Paramount Theater, the Chicago area premiere of Waitress, now through March 30th. Based on the hit 2007 movie, the music and lyrics are by Grammy Award winner Sarah Bareilles, and to add to their list of accolades, it was nominated for 4 Tony Awards, including Best Musical and Best Original Score. The show is basically about a waitress. Her name is Jenna. She feels very trapped in an unhappy marriage, but she also a talented pie maker. So she finds room to explore her options, her emotions, her situation. Her friends offer her, let's just say, some conflicting recipes for happiness. But real talk, only Jenna can do the soul searching to decide for her, what are the right ingredients for her life. You see what I'm doing. It's about a restaurant, so I'm using some restaurant metaphors. Make Paramount your home for entertainment and get your tickets today at ParamountAurora.com or call 630-896-6666. Use promo code CityCast for $5 off up to 4 tickets. I want to talk a little bit more about some of these other air safety trends that you're watching, because like you said, it's not just what's happening in the air or at the airports. We've seen, even in just recent week, the mayor let go his head of aviation. We've seen cuts at the FAA. Are you worried about the trends we are seeing in terms of the consolidation of the federal government and how that's going to impact flight safety, the amount of people inside of the tower, and so forth?
Yeah, I think one thing that we see in air travel is it's such an exacting business. It's technical, it's stressful. You have to follow protocol exactly, and our country is well known as a leader in that. So the FAA is highly respected. It is, though, discouraging to hear a chaotic environment surrounding the FAA and how that could impair some of the morale of air traffic controllers, attrition. When you got this swirl happening where thousands of FAA administrators are getting laid off. And, we'll have to wait and see. And there's been no evidence that it's affecting the air traffic control system. But we'd all like things to settle down a little bit. And I can tell you, for 10, 15 years ago, it was in the cockpit of airlines where airline pilots were upset about pay cuts and bankruptcies and things like that. And, it probably affected the team spirit in the cockpit. That is no longer an issue because the airlines are making nice money and the pilots are, I think, have contracts they're mostly pleased with. But the FAA is a bit of a thunderstorm right now, no pun intended. And that's, at a time when a lot of air traffic controllers are retiring. So
I was going to ask about that. I was like, I've been hearing about it I remember somebody doing a speech when I was in college about so many, not only air traffic controllers, but engineers, pilots. Have we done enough in recent years to address the exodus of retirees and replace those with young, well-trained professionals?
We have made some strides. United Airlines, for example, is like sponsoring a flight school to help increase the supply of its pilots. We're seeing similar to air traffic controllers. One thing that is disappointing, though, and that's where we're nervous about what's happening in Washington, is that our country has kind of lagged behind some other countries in really putting the latest technology into the control towers, keeping us on the cutting edge, using computers and AI to the absolute maximum extent, while of course still keeping humans in the center of it. And you start causing this disruption, and you are concerned that our leadership in terms of air traffic control could diminish. And the more that happens, the less safety buffer you might get. So there's going to be some concerns long term if things don't settle down in Washington.
Mm-hmm. I know that United and American have been moving from smaller planes to largely more safer airplanes, but the second largest manufacturer of those larger airplanes, I believe, is Boeing, and they remain in and out of the news for one crisis or another.
Boeing has become a bit of a soap opera. Unfortunately, the soap opera is sort of ending, but one thing we know, and the first thing you said that jumped to that first, is that kind of the bigger the plane is, the safer it is. So a regional jet, airlines like them because they're inexpensive to operate and they can, fly thin routes and so forth and still make money. But they're moving away from those to bigger planes. Pilot salaries are up and landing fees are up, and it's just more cost effective to use bigger planes. And that's good news because the safety increment's pretty significant, particularly in bad weather when you're in a bigger plane. So that's good news. In fact, they're expanding O'Hare with the idea that airplanes are going to get bigger. So most planes will be like 170 people plus, I think in a few years as these original jets get phased out. But back to Boeing, now the problem is they can't get that assembly line sped up because they can't get parts, and there's been some labor issues, and Airbus, its competitor, is winning the battle, you might say. So our efforts to make this transition to bigger planes is going to be a little painful for a while. And that could push airfares up even in the next few years if they just can't get these new planes. And, God knows if we start having international tariffs, how that could affect things. But you're right. Boeing is in the news sometimes for the wrong reason these days.
As of now, United's headquarters is still in Chicago, but it feels like there are always floating stories that they may relocate. Is this something the city should be worried about and be doing everything in its power to make sure it doesn't happen?
It's a great question because there's a little bit of mystery happening with all this land they're buying in Denver and moving some maintenance people out there, and Denver's been growing. They did announce a pretty big expansion at O'Hare a few weeks ago, and that's been good news. They want more gates and so forth, so they're not losing their commitment to O'Hare. But boy, that would be a shot to our ego. And I worked at United in my younger days, so I have a special place in my heart for the company. But I do think, if those rumors, it's mostly rumors and speculation yet, if things heat up, you can expect the full court press to keep them here because they are one of our crown jewels.
Yeah, I was going to say, at times it feels like the Bears Arlington Heights story. Like they've bought the land. Does that signal the move we're all thinking?
Yeah, good question. There's a lot of land they bought. Denver's long been a center for their maintenance. So the best interpretation is that they're going to, push that maintenance function to become larger and stay here in Chicago. And I do think there's not yet a grand scheme to move out of Chicago, but certainly there are some warning signs. And, we have, over the years, used to have so many transportation companies based here, all the railroads and Midway Airlines. And one by one, many of them moved to other cities.
Yeah, I believe it's still in the top 10 for largest employers in the Chicagoland area. And so, like you said, I believe the city would definitely put on a full court press, the city and the state. How do you personally feel about flying these days? What would you, if, my family members are asking me, is this a good time to fly? Because a lot of people right now are thinking about their spring break trip, their first vacation of the year, and they're trying to fly in or out of Midway and O'Hare. What should I tell them?
I think the power is in the numbers. I mean, the odd thing about studying airline safety is, unlike car crashes, which kind of happen every day, so you can look at the trends and you can see if things are going up or down. With airline accidents, they're so rare that when an accident occurs, like the Reagan, it's hard to tell if there's a trend or whether that's just, statistically just an aberration. And I think we're still pretty much convinced that while these accidents did occur in short succession, only one, the Potomac accident, involved, a large commercial jet with a large number of fatalities. It had 60 or so, just terrible accident. But it doesn't really suggest that there's a trend or there's a diminishment of pilot skills. After the Coogan Air accident in New York in the early 2000s, the pilot requirements went up dramatically. So we're pretty confident that people in the cockpit are highly experienced. There's always lingering concerns. The air traffic control is a little understaffed. Mm-hmm. And I think what we saw in Reagan is that, military planes, helicopters flying around these busy airports, you better study whether that's a good idea. It's impressive how I look back 20 years ago, we just 40 years ago, I should say, just kind of tolerated these accidents. They happened and we'd make a few changes, but it was just part of life. And now, every crisis becomes kind of a great moment of introspection of how this happened. And you can be sure that's happening right now.
Do you expect the media coverage around this to die down, or do you think this is our obsession of the moment?
Well, I keep saying it's dying down, and then we have another close call or something, and the debate continues. But they're all for very different reasons. That's the odd thing about this: is it isn't one say pilot training narrative. These are all different situations, and that's why this is a very perplexing moment.
Yeah, hard to prepare for human error in the various ways it happens in this field. Well, again, Dr. Joe Schwieterman, we appreciate you making time for CityCast Chicago.
Thank you.
Before we get out of here, make sure you bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm. There you can catch up on old podcast episodes, check out our neighborhood and walking guides, subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, and of course, stay tapped into our events calendar. We're updating it every couple of weeks for you. Now, you know we can't wrap things up without some good news. 312 Day is this Wednesday, and a couple of places across the city are throwing events. I'm thinking of Lemon Chicago, Goose Island, and Vienna Beef are linking up for an event. Plus, there are a handful of meal and drink deals around the city. I'll drop a link in the show notes. The Music Box, for example, for $3.12, you can get some popcorn and a drink. You know, we got some other deals at the link in our show notes. As always, we appreciate you for listening and reading. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.